When I was in primary school, my mum, she'd always pack my lunch for me. She always gave me something sustaining like a sandwich, something sweet like a chocolate, and something healthy like an apple. I'd eat the sandwich and the chocolate, but I'd always leave the apple. I had this silly idea that fruit wasn't as cool, that all the best lunches had chips and lollies and sandwiches, that my fruit just didn't look as awesome, so I'd hide the fruit in the bottom of my backpack and forget about it. Days, weeks, sometimes even months later, my parents would find the fruit. Only when they found it, it had festered and decayed. It had morphed into something else in the bottom of my backpack. And if I had eaten the fruit after it had decayed, then it would have made me sick. And the irony is that what should really have brought me health and vitality would have ended up bringing me harm, all because of the way that I perceived of fruit. Many Christians have the same ironic relationship with their doubts. There's this unhelpful perception in modern-day Christianity that doubt's the opposite to faith, that you can't be a Christian and have doubts. Such a perception actually forces us to deny our doubts or hide them, but there in the recesses of our minds, we take something which could have helped our faith and made it a hindrance, all because of the way we perceive of doubt. One of the famous stories from the Gospel of John is the story of Thomas in chapter 20. I think we can learn two things about doubt from reading his story. Thomas was a disciple who spent 3 years on the road with Jesus. Then Jesus died, and the hope that he was the king who would come to liberate his people from evil died with it. All of the disciples' hopes had come to nothing. But then a few days later, Jesus is resurrected from the dead, and he appears to the disciples. Thomas was out at the time, and he missed Jesus' first appearance. So when his peers start giving him the report of Jesus' resurrection, he thinks that his mates have gone mad. Dead bodies don't just rise from the dead. Thomas would have thought that in the same way that any modern person would think that today. He said these words, he said, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my fingers where the nails were, I will not believe." A week later, the resurrected Jesus appeared to Thomas, and what Jesus said was fascinating. He didn't say, well, just have faith. He didn't say, because you've doubted, you're out. Let me go with the other 10, it's going to be sweet. You do your own thing. He said actually something else. He said, put your finger here, see my hands, reach out your hand and put it into my side. In other words, get this, Jesus condescended to Thomas's need for evidence. He responded to Thomas's question. He met Thomas's doubt. And I think this teaches us something. It shows us that being a Christian doesn't mean being somebody who doesn't have doubts. It means being somebody who is honest about their doubts and brings them to God. So don't hide your doubts. Jesus is the God who meets doubters where they are at. Notice, though, what happens next. Jesus says to Thomas, stop doubting and believe. Some people might read these words and think, that seems a bit contradictory. See, on one level you say that doubts are okay, on another level you say that they're not okay. What's going on here? See, Thomas's concern was super specific. He found it hard to believe that Jesus was raised from the dead. And at this point in history, Jesus could meet that concern really specifically. This was after Jesus' resurrection from the dead, and it was before his ascension to heaven. So the embodied appearance of Jesus to Thomas was possible. Jesus then, very specifically, meets Thomas where he is at. And once Thomas's answerable question was met, Jesus commands him, he says, now step into this story unashamedly, with absolute confidence, not looking back. Stop doubting and believe. I think that there are heaps of ways to doubt God, and in my experience, I've seen it to be mostly one of two things. One type of doubt can be an intellectual question or objection. Another kind of doubt can be sort of a predisposition to run from God. Intellectual objections are a normal part of trusting anything more fully. For example, your question might be, are the Gospels historically reliable? Or why does God seem so hidden? If your doubt is an intellectual question, then don't hide it or feel ashamed of it. Be honest about it. Go to God and his people with it and make the investigation part of your discipleship. In fact, that's real faith, trusting God with who you are and who you're not. You can approach God with all your boldness and all your timidity, all of your faith and all of your doubt. But predispositions to avoid God are a different thing. See, sometimes we use doubt as a disguise for what really is just a stubbornness of the will. I've met plenty of people who've had all of their questions satisfactorily answered, but then who refuse to follow the evidence where it leads. A better name for this kind of phenomenon wouldn't be doubt. It'd be pride. See, there's a type of questioning in this life which operates less like a sincere investigation and more like a defense mechanism against God. To this type of predisposition, God's injunction is simple: humble yourself. Or in Jesus' words, stop doubting and believe. See, the God of the Christian story offers you evidence and invites you to investigate, but he refuses to be the tame object of your inquiry for too long. Jesus is the Lord of the world and the God of the cosmos, and that really means something. It means that as you look into the Christian faith, you're not entertaining ideas at arm's length. You're actually contemplating a king who is very much alive and who seeks his people out, which means that while you contemplate the evidence there is for God's existence and God's goodness, that same God, by his Spirit and through his word, will actually cause you to investigate your own heart in the process. And when God does that, he is no longer the object of your inquiry. You become the object of his. So how do you question through doubt? Investigate the evidence for God. Be warned though, that same God is the one who searches the heart of doubters.